for more on the summer Davos this year in Dalian, and also what kind of discussions might be inspiring us forward. To understand that, I have Zhang Jianping, Director General of the Center for Regional Cooperation at the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation. That's a very long title. Yeah. Welcome to our program, sir. In New York, we are likely to be joined by Max Wolff a bit later. Meanwhile, in Southampton, in the UK, Mike Bastin, a visiting professor at the Beijing University of International Business and Economics. I want to welcome the two of you first. May I have your answer, Mr. Zhang? People are confused as a result of the apparent destruction of the already existing system and the yet to be established new world order. What to do with our economy, and how can we work together on what kind of mechanism? I think that's a very fundamental question all of us are thinking these days.
Yeah, this is actually this is a very critical question, issues, but also very difficult, especially at this time of point. You know that Western countries they have new phenomenon, new trend that is anti-globalization and Brexit, something like that. A lot of people in Western countries confused on that. On the other hand, developing countries actually in progress of development, we are still want to chase globalization as well as regional integration. We hope we could be involved in global value chain and get valuable development opportunities. Especially, we can have our labor division in global system.
There seems to be very different kinds of goals among the developed and the developing economies. So let me go to you, Professor Bastin. What is your reading of that very different views about the world and what we want to achieve in the near future? Will that further divide us?
I don't think we'll see further division. I think in the developing world, the governments are very much more about inclusivity, what's often referred to as inclusive growth, and they're placing a lot of emphasis on innovation and new technology, and also integration and better trade, a trading environment. What we're seeing in the mature markets of the world is a lot of discontent. A lot of people are unhappy with perhaps the division of wealth. But I think on an optimistic note, I do see a very positive future for both the emerging and the developed markets of this world.
Optimism is one thing, reality could be another thing. Let's talk about some of the things you just mentioned, Professor Bastin. One of them is innovation. Of course, Mr. Zhang, innovation is a key word for China as well. But together with innovation, together with new technology, it could be a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it could help with the efficiency, and it could also help create further new market. But on the other hand, new technology is likely to take away some of the old jobs, and the educational system is not catching up right now, to create new jobs. So what to do? That is an ultimate question.
I think that in two sectors, actually, what you described already express this type of concern. One is e-commerce. In China, e-commerce, especially transnational cross-border e-commerce, already had a very rapid development. On the other hand, those old traditional business sectors are suffering from this process. So I'm afraid that in the future we need to have new rules and regulations to make more balance on traditional and new business model. Another is if you see the car hailing a service platform. Also on one hand,
shared economy.
Shared economy. They provided a lot of new job opportunities for some of new drivers. But on the other hand, they have their bad impact on those old drivers.
Mr. Bastin, you know very well because you've been working in China for quite some time. Labor intensive is still one of the advantages the Chinese economy enjoy over some of the other, at least developed economies. So the shared economy, new technologies, robots, and AI, many have described as the solution to our problem, but others describe it as the challenge to our already existing problem. So particularly for developing countries like China, labor intensive is still one of the ways to make the economy work. So will that work in China? Can the country be prepared?
Well, yes, it can. I mean, it certainly needs a change of approach, and this is where this inclusive model of economic growth comes into play very much, and the government, the Chinese government, which is already doing a lot, needs to be very, very actively involved in managing this transition. As you say, labor-intensive industries still dominate. The new industries, innovation in technology, are emerging very strongly in China, particularly with younger generations. Now, the government and other organizations need to work very, very closely together to ensure there is reskilling, transfer of skills, and training for those almost necessary redundancies in perhaps a lot of the Rust Belt industries, and a transition to a more modern economy. So there is a solution. There's probably a short-term, a certain amount of pain, but longer term, I think we are seeing change, and I think the university sector could be far more flexible and adaptable than you think. And I think with the right government intervention and support, this can happen. Chinese education system is in need of some sort of reform and does need to reflect this new entrepreneurial culture that is now needed and is sweeping, I think, across China. But I don't see any reason why that can't happen. And I come back to the fact that there are several Chinese universities now that make, for example, not just the top 100 global universities, but the top 50, and Tsinghua in particular is almost in the top 10.
The new technology companies
Yeah.
that are moving fast, particularly those with the big data, with a lot of technologies in their hands.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's likely to be a widening gap of wealth as a result of the unfair or at least uneven distribution of these resources, big data and technologies. So what is likely to be the role of the government?
Yeah.
And how is the government going to do it without violating the rules of the market economy, while at the same time try to close the ever-widening gap as a result of technology?
Actually, China didn't involve in first industrial revolution as well as the second, but now we just catch up with third and fourth.
You have the leap.
Yeah, we have to working very hard. In China, government can play a very important role because both central and local government, they have a lot of tools. For example, from governmental policies, they can provide more and more R&D input. This is one thing. Second thing is that we can adjust our tax system, and in order to stimulate innovation. And third one, in order to encourage those firms to have more input on R&D, and we also have a series, policy tools for them.
What kind of platform China now, as a runner-up to be the front runner in the world, can do together with the others? We talk about the Belt and Road Initiative, we talk about the BRICS, we talk about the G20, and yet it seems at this point we still don't have a renewed international and regional system that's likely to carry us steadily forward on different fronts. Professor Bastin.
I think that's a good point. I think what China can do, certainly in the short term, obviously China will play and is playing an increasingly leading role in this new world order. Specifically, I think their role in the short term will be to lead integration and more clarity, a more clear direction, economic direction across Asia. And obviously the emerging economies are largely from Asia, so that really will be very, very important for the world order. So I think that's a priority, and I think with the Belt and Road, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, and other initiatives. I think that's really perhaps the priority in the short term. In the longer term, I see China forging closer and closer foreign relations with major powers around the world. And obviously we accept these institutions, the IMF, the World Trade Organization, the G7, the G8,
right.
All that's up for grabs. That could be really changed quite dramatically, even in the next probably 5 to 10 years. And China will be at the center of new world economic organizations.
Max Wolff, the professor of economics from New School University in the United States, is now also joining us. Professor Wolff, it is not the very first time that you and I, together with our colleagues, talk about this, but this is really at the juncture of our world that we see old system do not work 100% anymore, and we see a lot of discontent toward that, and yet the new system not established. Okay, we mentioned several ideas already flying around. Belt and Road Initiative, AIIB, we talk about the G20, we talk about BRICS, we talk about some of the regional platforms as well, ASEAN, for example, in Asia, and yet which one of these is likely to provide us with some strong inspirations so that we can further explore in that direction? Professor Wolff.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and thanks for having me. Look, I think part of the unusualness of this moment, yeah, thank you. So I think one of the odd features of this moment is normally a new world order rises, and it has to strive and prove itself to replace the old order. What we've seen in the last year or so is the old order, the sort of folks who had their hands on the wheel, and the old order just give up and walk away in a way that was much more rash, much more rushed, and much less well thought through than mostly in history would happen. So it's a little bit rushed. That being said, I think G20 leadership, I think merging regional power leadership, and I think also Asian-based leadership, because it looks like we're about in the early innings of an Asian century or two, make a lot of sense. I don't think we need a single unipolar world leader. I think it's better to be in a multipolar world. And I think one of the slightly messy, if probably good features of the near-term future is moving back to a multipolar order, which has usually been more stable and more commonly the world order.
Will that create more economic and trade frictions as a result? Professor Bastin, I mean, are we going to expect more chaos before some order could fall in?
Well, that's the fear that these trading blocs, if you like, Europe, Asia, and the Americas, will become exactly that and increasingly solidified. I'm not sure that I see that being major friction. I think what we'll see with the established economies already, there'll be a recognition and an acceptance there that they need Asia, perhaps more than Asia needs them. So I think that any frictions will be surmountable, and that the European economies, the American economy, and companies from those economies will work harder and harder to make economic gain and market penetration across Asia. So I think there will be better cooperation as a result of Asia's market attractiveness increasing substantially.
But Professor Wolff, when you think about that, it seems that everybody has their priorities. In Europe, for example, the Brexit, the overall election, one after another, creates so much stir in that continent that is almost impossible for them to concentrate on anything else. Here in Asia, we see the rise of China. We also see the Korean Peninsula, big problem, South China Sea, the trade frictions and possible trade cooperation as well. In North America, you see a very different government, a very different president. It seems everybody is struggling with their own priorities, already too much on their table. Will they have the power and the strength to seek on something common so that they can develop together? It's a win-win. Professor Wolff, very briefly from you.
Yeah, I think they will. I mean, I think we're seeing a smaller Europe forced closer together, and I think we're going to see better European-Asian cooperation. And I think that a fair number of countries took their foreign policy from the United States as an aftershock of the Second World War, and I think that's ending. So I think we'll have to have new agreements, but I don't think those new agreements will be weak or will usher in an era that defined by chaos.
And Mr. Zhang here in Beijing, we have 40 seconds for you as well. What is your thought?
I think that today Asia European countries as well as North American countries, the NAFTA area. Actually, that's the biggest economic circle in the world. Also, actually, within us, actually, for example, EU and the US is the biggest and second biggest trade partners. In this regard, we hope that we can have our very rational approach to deal with our trade issues. Meanwhile, we need to have more dialogue on those trade issues.
Zhang Jianping, Max Wolff, Mike Bastin, great to have you. Thank you so much.